this conference is a culmination of work we started, not just as COVID hit, but long before that, with discussions around a Green New Deal or Green Industrial Revolution, Building Back Better has come since, and the aim to get food and farming to feature within those. Arguably, a focus on food and farming economy has been there from the very start of Sustain in 1999, and before that in our predecessors' alliances at the SAFE Alliance and the National Food Alliance. But over the years, whilst issues around obesity, food poverty, climate, nature, many other things have rightly taken centre stage, we haven't perhaps given quite as much time as an organisation to the question of jobs and livelihoods and wider economic issues. And yet it's a key part of sustainability. So we started to challenge ourselves at Sustain to put ourselves in policymakers' shoes, politicians' hard hats, if you will, and say, how do we frame this issue in a way that really resonates with government? I mean, after all, food and farming employs 1 in 7 working age adults, so it should be really high up the agenda, particularly when talking about the economy. As you heard, I put this to the Minister, and I wasn't really convinced by her answer. There may be implicit links there, but not explicit mention. So where we've made a great case for practices and policies on the grounds of environmental, health and social impact, the economic argument, the impact on livelihoods has perhaps been lacking at times. So as I said, we challenged ourselves to start quantifying this from farm to fork via fishing, baking, animal feed, infrastructure and procurement, and asking ourselves, how can we start to champion the economic benefits? And crucially, what are the implications for livelihoods, the policies that we advocate? This is not suddenly the dominant argument, at least not from our perspective, but it is an important one. And I'd argue that if the vision we're championing of better food and farming is to get cuts during the coming years, and even right now, we need to be able to articulate this strand. So there, I've thrown down the gauntlet, and we've got some folks who've been brave enough to pick it up. So next up, we've got almost a dozen quick fire pitches. These used to be called elevator pitches, but that term just doesn't really feel right for Sustain. So whilst these pitches are going on, please use the Q&A to ask speakers any questions, and go on Twitter using hashtag Sustain2020 and tell us your ideas for putting food and farming at the heart of the economic recovery and what you think about some of the ideas that are being put forward now. And thanks to those who are already involved in that discussion on Twitter. There's quite a healthy one going on. So I'm warning all the speakers. I'm going to be a ruthless chair. I'm armed with a horn, and I'm not afraid to honk it when your 2 minutes are up. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Ruth Westcott, our Climate and Fish Campaign Coordinator at Sustain, who has a vision to build back bluer, rebuild fisheries for 10,000 jobs in coastal communities.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, who would have thought fishing, which makes up less than 0.1% of GDP, would be such a hot political issue in 2020? Not me. We may know in the next few hours whether a deal has been struck to allow UK fishing boats to access more catches after Brexit. But I would like to argue that regardless of the outcome of negotiations with the EU, we've got the opportunity to boost the UK's domestic fishing industry, and I have 3 policy solutions to do so. The first is to recover our fish populations. Now, historically, the UK's waters have provided a much greater amount of fish than they do today, because many of our stocks have been fished well below their economic optimum. But the good news is that fishing populations rebuild remarkably quickly if they're managed well. And if all commercial stocks were recovered, our fishing industry could almost double catches without depleting the stock. This would significantly boost revenue and create at least 10,000 new jobs in fishing and associated industries. A moderate estimate suggests that an extra revenue of over 300 million and an increase in GDP of at least 600 million per year is possible. Given the desperate situation for many fishing communities thanks to COVID and very likely Brexit, we would call for compensation for fishers where they need to reduce catches in the short term to achieve this. The quicker we do this, the quicker we can see the economic gains from recovered stocks. We estimate that this compensation would come to roughly 200 million per year over 10 years, and that's only about a third of the potential annual GDP increase from doing so. Policy solution 2 is to achieve sustainability certification or a Marine Conservation Society rating of 1 to 3 for all the UK's fish. Global demand for sustainable certified fish is growing 10 times faster than for conventional fish, but at the moment, lots of UK fisheries are missing out on this growing market. In fact, some of our cod, scampi, nephrops, scallops, herring, bream, cuttlefish, eel, halibut, ray, skate and whiting caught in UK waters is actually considered fish to avoid by the Marine Conservation Society. Now that means that they can't be sold in our public sector institutions. They're also blocked from the menus of businesses that serve 1 billion meals per year that have signed up to the sustainable fish buying policies as part of Sustainable Fish Cities. I'm going to have to skip because I'm totally out of time. So I would just say that this can all be achieved by government putting these measures, including setting catch limits clearly at sustainable levels, channeling funding and mandating better monitoring and data collection via new annual fishing statements that have been enabled as part of the recent fishing bill. And when you consider that the potential benefits of boosted regional recreational fishing, which actually employs more people than commercially fishing, and coastal tourism, it's clear that investing in our marine ecosystems is part of a Blue New Deal that we desperately need. With coastal communities like West Wales, West Cornwall, our coastal communities need investment, and fishing is a perfect mechanism to do so. Sorry to...
I'm so sorry to cut you off. It's amazing what you can pack into 2 minutes. That's a fantastic vision. I now want to hand over to Ben Raskin, Head of Horticulture and Agroforestry Soil Association, who's going to be talking about agroforestry for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ben. We're living in an age of efficiency, aren't we, where low prices are king and cutting margins is the driving force of agricultural innovation. Hedges have been removed, rotations have been shortened and simplified, and livestock and crops have been exiled into separate specialised farming operations. We now have fewer than 1% of our population working in farming, and our efficient, specialised food system means that a 1,000-acre farm can be worked by one operator in a self-driving tractor. Well, there is an alternate vision, a more complex and vibrant rural economy. Agroforestry is the deliberate integration of trees with crops or livestock with compelling potential benefits, but there's no doubt that properly managing trees on farms takes time and skill. However, planting trees creates opportunities. We're net importers of timber, fruit, nuts and herbs. So just to give a few examples, organic herbs alone, the imports are estimated to be worth £2 billion. And some of these are tree crops like ginkgo or lime. Wood chip and timber could substitute more environmentally damaging building materials. And walnuts, hazelnuts, chestnuts, even almonds can be grown in the UK. But all of these trees need planting, fencing, weeding, pruning, and the output from these trees has to be picked, processed, packed, sold. So as you can see, agroforestry provides new employment and shared farming opportunities. It also has the potential to spread labour on farms over a longer period, which can help to reduce the seasonal nature of a lot of farming jobs. And despite the absence of policy or financial support, innovative farmers are planting trees. And I want to support this farmer-led tree revolution. So let's embrace diversity, let's embrace complexity, and let's embrace community, and let's rebuild a rural economy that brings wood back into farming. Thank you.
Perfectly timed, Ben. Brilliant. You knew the horn was coming. Thank you very much, Ben. Over to Vicki Hird, who's our Head of Sustainable Farming at Sustain, who has 2 minutes on supply chains and infrastructure.
Thank you very much.
Video. Thank you.
Thanks, Vic. I can't undo my video because somebody else have to do that. I totally agree with what Ben was saying there. Fantastic. And I am going to talk about 2 issues at the heart of why farming is not able to just start my video now. Oh, won't let me. Okay. Oh, everything's crashed. Okay. Sorry about this. I can't. I hope you can still hear me. I'll keep going.
We can hear you, Vicki.
Okay, great. So the 2 issues why farming is not able to produce the food we need, protect the environment, animal welfare, and protect jobs and livelihoods. And those 2 issues are money and power. The lack of power in the food chain for farmers, we've worked for many years to make supply chains better, and so the big retailers play fair with farmers and growers. That's absolutely critical, and we have achieved some progress on that with the new fair dealing. Sorry, I keep trying to get my camera going and it won't. We've made headway with the fair dealing clause in the Agriculture Act, but we need to make that happen, and it's slow. I've mentioned public money, subsidies and support schemes, and via investment, impact investors, etc. So looking at the market, only 9% of the £120 billion value that's spent in the UK on farming goes to farmers. And this is far too small, and it will not change without action. Now, we know the many benefits of shorter, less centralised supply chains, including more jobs in smaller enterprises, markets for produce from good to rehearse all those in 2 minutes. But what we do now think is that they need to come out of the niche bracket and seriously challenge the major retailers, traders and procurement, because without that, the market, that 9%, will not grow. So I want to suggest that ultimately we have a goal of 25% market share for non-multiple, non-big box food supply, and we can do this through investment in better supply chains, cooperative and collaborative approaches through farming, working together, and with better traders that deal fairly with farmers and growers, working together to get a decent amount of the food pound, allowing them to invest in environmentally friendly farming, higher animal welfare, good jobs, and they can provide less processed, healthier foods to far more customers more easily. So we need to be cutting out the unnecessary intermediaries and processing, shareholder dividends, high executive salaries and offshore tax havens. So my proposal is that we divert current finance, the public, those DEFRA money and possibly the shared prosperity funds, the private money, and we've just done a blog on our website on innovative finance, the impact investors, so have a look at that, and infrastructure investment, such as on new abattoirs and cutting room facilities. How about one in each county? New milling and storage facilities, low or no interest grants for electric vehicles, investment in dynamic procurement models for public procurement, and critically in the guidance and advice. There's so much that we could be putting investment and support into. We need a new era of successful, significant regional food systems that work for the farmer, the environment, animals and consumers. Thank you,
Vicki. Really sorry to force you to wind up there. And you did mention a blog, so please do put a link to that in the chat box. And I'm loving all the duck mentions in the chat box. This does sound a bit like a duck, it's true. I don't think that's even the reference. Next up, we have a double act on organic farming, starting with Andrew Burgess, who's director and owner of Produce World and founder of RB Organic and chair of the NFU Organic Forum, amongst many other things. Andrew, if you want to switch on your video, I know you were on a second ago, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. My video has been disabled, so if somebody would like to re-enable it, I will carry on regardless. Right, I think I'm now visible. I wrote a long speech because I didn't really have time to write a short one. Organic farming really has changed everything at Houghton, a 3,500 acre estate in North Norfolk. Before we started organic 20 years ago, it was a barren place. Conventional combinable crops and sugar beet are mostly done by contractors, with only 3 men on the whole farm, and it was a bit of a soulless place. The farm was run down and performed badly, not just financially, but also fertility was low and the soil was dead. And in spite of being in several environmental schemes, the biodiversity was poor, with very few predatory insects on the farm to help us with our pest control. Since going organic and introducing several complementary exercises, the place is now unrecognisable. There are now over 30 full-time employees in the farming businesses alone, most are living locally. We do have a problem with second homes in Norfolk, but that's for another day. The workforce has every level from management through to skilled farm work, and the 30 full-time employees is swelled by a further 70 casuals at peak time. We're very proud that we have a young team. The MD is 32 and his team are all under 40. How many other farming businesses can boast that? It's the organic that is really attracting young people with lots of energy and ideas. It all works due to the holistic nature of the enterprises. Mixed organic farming with vegetables has created a perfect balance of nutrition and soil structure improvement, driven by high organic matter and crop rotation. Every enterprise is bringing something to the party, and yet each enterprise is a specialist operation. We only do the vegetables, and they go to Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Tesco's, all of the big multiples that Vicki doesn't like. The pork, chicken and dairy teams are also very focused and specialist, and they all go into the big retailers too. The beef, sheep and arable is run by the state, and this completes the picture. The animals are the fertility engine. The grazing of the clover-rich lays and the manures they generate are rapidly improving soil structure and biological activity, as well as sequestering tons of carbon. In every measure, this has been a success: financial, environmental and social. Going organic changed everything at Houghton. Is that my 2 minutes? Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. You beat the horn. You got there before I could. I'd now like to hand over to Jim Aplin, who runs Hotchpotch Organics and is Secretary of the Organic Growers Alliance. Over to you, Jim.
Since the early 2000s, me and my partner have been growing about 1 hectare of mixed vegetables and cut flowers on a much larger mixed organic farm of over 300 hectares. We regularly move the veg patch around the farm to follow its rotation for fertility. In 2020, these have been the results. Our main input has been mentally and physically skilled labour, me and my partner full-time with some casual help, also seeds, a little diesel and a bit of water, no fertiliser or other inputs. From this, we've harvested nearly 30 tonnes of vegetables this year, sold direct to around 220 households through a weekly farmers market and a very local box scheme. This supports our family. Scaling up from our operation on the back of an envelope, 125,000 hectares could produce weekly veg for every household in the UK and support 250,000 skilled jobs. That's on less than 1.5% of UK farmland. It took us quite some time to reach this level of productivity, and we did it without public support. But we had a supportive landlord, which was crucial to our growth. We improved with experience as we grew, but the investment we needed to make over the years to improve our productivity was generally on small items of machinery and equipment. We weren't entitled to basic payments and we weren't highly capitalised. And we also went under the radar for capital grants from government to agriculture. It's like we weren't there and it held us back. Small targeted payments, capital grants and loans to small organic growers, together with incentives for larger farmers to offer opportunities, support and make room for them, could put organic horticulture in a position to grow much more quickly and deliver high quality fresh food, environmental benefits and a significant amount of high quality jobs in the countryside. Yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Jim. Perfect timing and a wonderful, wonderful story as well. Thank you. Next up, we have Chris Young, who's campaign coordinator for the Real Bread campaign at Sustain. And Chris is calling for an honest crust act for a better bread Britain. Over to you, Chris, for more alliterations.
So at the moment, the UK baking industry employs something like 31,000 people, and that includes the cakers and the biscuiteers. We consume around 13 million loaves a day, most of which are additive laden, churned out by the industrial loaf fabricators. Now, if we shifted the buying of those loaves to bread bought from Real Bread bakeries and small independent neighbourhood bakeries, that could support something like 75,000 jobs. That's more than the entire baking industry, sorry, more than twice the entire baking industry at the moment. One of the obstacles to that happening is current loaf labelling and marketing legislation. At the moment, for example, there are many loaves can be sold without an ingredients list, so you don't know what additives have gone into them. Also, Victoria mentioned this earlier, they're not looking at reviewing things like whole grain. You can have 2% wholemeal flour in a loaf and sell it as whole grain. You can sell any old thing as sourdough. You can have an artisan loaf that's had no artisan baker anywhere near it. Freshly baked, could have been made in France, frozen months ago, years ago, and then merely rebaked in store. What we want to see is that legislation changing so people know what they're buying, because that would then support the small independent bakeries that keep our high streets alive. Those bakeries create more jobs per loaf and create greater reinvestment in the local economy for every pound spent. We also believe that the real bread baker's job is more fulfilling, therefore better supporting the welfare of those food workers. Now, Michael Gove back in 2018 promised that he would review the law. I chased that up with the current Secretary of State at DEFRA, George Eustace, back this October, and I've had no reply. It's got a 20-day response time. 7 weeks later, no reply. Interestingly, I just heard Victoria say that they renewed that promise, but hey. So if you go to our website, realbreadcampaign.org, you can read a lot more about this. You can find updates on our work and also how to join the Real Bread campaign.
Thank you, Chris. Again, perfectly timed. I would like to hand over now to Lynne Davies, who's Chief Exec of the Open Food Network, who's going to talk about 40-minute food hubs in 2 minutes.
Hi, yeah, thank you. All right, so our pitch to create jobs in food and farming is to establish a community food hub once for every 40-minute drive across the UK. What's a community food hub? Well, they're diverse, but it's the name that we give to community-focused businesses creating a link between producers and shoppers. So they aggregate orders across many producers and coordinate logistics. But more than that, they have local relationships and they support good production methods. People in these organizations tend to have their fingers on the pulse with local goings on. And we really saw the benefit of this during lockdown 1, when community food hubs were able to scale quickly, reroute supply from hospitality to retail, and to prioritize key workers and those folks that were self-isolating. More recently, we've seen community food hubs implement dignified and effective responses to food affordability and accessibility, helping everyone access high quality food. Community food hubs, they build local resilience. So in our research, we estimate that community food hubs create 3 times as many FTE jobs than supermarkets per pound spent. Most of these jobs are flexible and part-time, so they fit with people's lives. And on average, 70 to 80% of the sale price of produce goes to the producer, which means more farm jobs too. Why a 40-minute drive apart? So this is a pattern we're seeing emerge. There's sufficient shoppers and producers in that kind of radius, and real benefits start to come about from collaborating, kind of a cross-pollination. So food hubs in Devon and Cornwall are now collaborating to create the Southwest Good Food Network, which is in turn creating another job, a distribution link between these hubs. And this is enabling niche producers to access a wider market and create a wider range for shoppers. What do we need to make this happen? Well, seed funding to create a 2-day-a-week role for 18 months is enough to get a community food hub toward viable, particularly when it's combined with the right tools and peer support, which is what we do in the Open Food Network community.
I'm not even having to honk the horn here because you beat me to it. Thanks ever so much, Lynne. That's great. Some really interesting comments coming up through the chat box and lots of great questions coming in as well. Keep them coming, and hopefully our speakers will go on there and to answer some of those. And it's a real shame we can't have a kind of a bigger discussion after these, after the panelists, after the pitches have spoken. Next up, I would like to welcome Devi Clark, who is Managing Director at Impact Hub King's Cross. Devi, tell us about good food and farming investment zones.
Hello, everybody. Picture this. As you stumble into your kitchen for breakfast, yawning and still half asleep, you hear the clink as your tiger milk arrives on the doorstep. Made of vegan tiger nuts in returnable glass bottles, it's deliciously rich, nutritious, and delivered by bicycle. You pair it with tea from Nemi Teas, toast from a sourdough loaf baked by Proof Bakery, both enterprises training and employing refugees, and tomatoes and mushrooms from your veg box from your local community farm. And that's just breakfast. Social enterprise SMEs like these ones are what we would propose to support through these good food and farming investment zones. We already run at Impact Hub a program called Feeding the City, both a startup and a growth program. and they have the potential to create jobs, not only any jobs, but very locally rooted. SMEs, in reality, although when we think of businesses, often people think of the big corporates, SMEs actually employ 61% of the UK workforce and produce 52% of the turnover. When we support enterprises like these, we don't select based on gender or ethnicity. We do ask that they be rooted in their community, in the community that their business is designed to serve. But as a result, what's happened is that we've ended up with 2/3 women and 1/3 from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. For example, Kina Mama, a catering company formed by 3 women who survived the Grenfell Tower disaster. While with many residents still living in B&Bs, their vision was to create food from their African heritage to provide delicious meals for pregnant women and new mothers. Good business, social and environmentally minded business is not about those corporate giants. It's about people like these. If you serve them, if we invest in them, they will serve you sustainably and generously. And they'll invest in your communities, not just breakfast, lunch and dinner, but in providing relationships and resilience in the local economy. That's it. Perfect timing. That was the end.
Thank you, Devi. I feel really evil having to sort of laugh or limit them to 2.
I was finished
you really
anyway.
get the sense of the idea and the proposal, and the numbers speak volumes in all of these. Next up, I'd like to hand over to Chrissie Storry, coordinator of the National Advisory Board of Dynamic Food Procurement, who's going to be talking about this concept.
Cool, thank you. So people think about food procurement as well, just buying food, but it really is so much more than just calories on a plate. It really is about food resilience, but it's also really about local economic resilience as well. Dynamic food procurement is an innovative, proven model of public sector food procurement, which at its heart aims to open up opportunities for local and sustainable SME producers and suppliers to be part of a public sector procurement food supply chain on an arrangement that suits them and the buyer, rather than the buyer wielding that balance of power. It enables an agile, short and transparent supply chain. So how can it contribute to good food livelihoods? Well, by relocalizing food supply chains for public sector, it means that more produce is needed close to the source of consumption, which in turn means that producers, that's both existing and new entrants, will be needed to produce more food as the sustained demand grows, and buying locally becomes the norm rather than the exception. And it's not all about growing though, because really not everybody likes mud, but it is hoped it will stimulate much needed and absolutely crucial investment and jobs in the processing infrastructure sectors, as well as logistics and tech. So what's needed now to make it work for all? Well, action and impetus. Everything has its time to come to fruition. We are at an absolutely crucial, critical point in embedding sustainable food procurement, where if it doesn't happen soon, we might well have missed the golden opportunity. I've been working in sustainable public sector procurement for a long time and have really come to the conclusion that everything needs a groundswell of action to tip it into reality, rather than just a few lone voices, which has happened to date. Now is the time for that groundswell of movement to take charge. Crown Commercial Service will be piloting a dynamic food procurement model pilot in the Southwest in 2021, but we need them to move faster. They've been dragging their heels slightly. But in addition, we need all areas of the UK to start demanding this model of procurement. It's not rocket science, or even just rocket for another food analogy, but it is different, and it will fundamentally change public sector food procurement for the good and for the good. That good is not just food, that just happens to be the deliverable, but everything that goes with a good food system, including sustainable jobs and sustainable livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Chrissie. It's we talked about and tried to work on procurement and define those the way through it for years and years. So it's really, really exciting to see a new approach that could really unlock something there. Thank you so much. So next up, we have Morven, Oliver-Larkin, Food Poverty Campaign Coordinator, who's going to be speaking about Meals on Wheels for the 21st century. Morven.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So I'm going to talk about the benefits of a robust Meals on Wheels service and how this can create good jobs and livelihoods all across the UK, so in towns, cities, suburbs and rural areas. I could speak at length about how beneficial Meals on Wheels services are to the people who receive them. There's a lot to say on that in terms of health, quality of life and overcoming isolation. But today I'm going to concentrate on the people who deliver the meals and run the service. So any economic recovery after COVID-19 obviously needs to build jobs back quickly, but it's also about quality of work. I spent several months researching Meals on Wheels services across the UK before COVID-19, but also during it. And I was struck by something that kept coming up when I spoke to the delivery staff and site managers there. And that was that they all really, really loved their work. And most came from the retail or hospitality sectors and had been pretty dissatisfied with their previous work. This came up time and time again. For example, one site manager I spoke to who used to manage several large sales teams said his previous work felt quite hollow, really. And a delivery driver who I did a ride along with, who'd been a cleaner previously, said this was the first job that she felt really proud to do and proud to come home and tell her kids about at the end of the week. And I think this is really striking because the jobs we'd create through proper investment in Meals on Wheels would attract people from the sectors that are currently worst hit by COVID-19. And who are at the moment at risk of losing jobs or who have lost jobs. So also this investment would create good, fulfilling jobs that people enjoy and feel proud to do. So to get all of these benefits, we need a Meals on Wheels service in every local area. And to make this happen, we need three key things. We need a statutory obligation on local authorities to ensure that all older people and others who struggle to access food are able to get this and can access at least one meal per day. We need start-up funding to establish services where they don't currently exist in local authorities, and we need ring-fenced annual funding from national government to continue this service. Thanks.
Beat me to it, Morven. Thank you very much. Really, really inspiring. Finally, I'd like to welcome Karen Luyckx, Head of Research at Feedback, to present a vision of safe leftovers for pigs, a win-win for farmers and the environment. Karen.
Thank you. Prevention of overproduction at source is our top priority, and every single person should have access to nutritious food in a fair and dignified way. But there will always be leftovers. Even during the Second World War, there was enough for a national pig bin campaign where peelings and meat bones were boiled and fed to omnivores such as pigs and chickens. There is expert agreement that feed can be made safe and free from disease such as African swine fever, which is inactivated with simple heat treatment. Treatment requirements need setting out in new legislation because we can no longer afford to lose nutrients out of the food system. Feeding livestock on leftovers instead of human edible crops is essential if we are to deliver nutritious food for all within planetary boundaries. It is also preferable from a climate and land use perspective compared to wholesale veganism. And it is better for farmers. Feed makes up 63% of total pig production costs. In contrast, in Japan, modern heat treatment plants deliver feed made from leftovers at half the cost of conventional feed. To balance economies of scale with transport costs in the UK context, we need around 30 treatment plants in areas of medium population density, creating an estimated 1,000 new jobs. If small and medium-sized farms just used EcoFeed, so no soya, wheat, barley or fish meal, we could produce around a quarter of current UK pig production, increasing the viability of 4,000 small and medium farms that already exist, plus 3,300 new small farms with pigs. To ensure savings reach farmers and support pig welfare, the EcoFeed industry must be cooperatively owned by the farmers themselves. Government support for startup capital is necessary and justified, given the emission savings, reduced reliance on imported feeds, and increased food security. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. A really inspiring way to finish there. It's awful to have to wrap things up now and not to hear longer from these speakers. Each one, I think, could probably be the focus of their own webinar, or at least a blog. In fact, you can read more about Chris Young's proposal on an Honest Crust Act on our blogs page, and we hope that more of our speakers will be able to do blogs on their pitches in the coming months.